Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Westborough Board of Selectmen. It is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. This meeting is being held remotely. And with that, I will read the governor's orders we've all become very comfortable with. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law 30A, Section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: through Westborough TV on channel 192 Charter and channel 28 Verizon. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Okay, great. So we have, I'll run through the agenda and then we'll begin our formal meeting. So first on the agenda is a discussion vote, application for alteration of premises for our outdoor dining, and our building commissioner will speak to that. Then we have a town meeting debrief with John Arnold, our town moderator. 6:05, discussion vote to execute purchase and sale agreement for the property located at 31 to 33 Eli Whitney Street. 6:35, discussion vote to set date of special town meeting, although we may or may not actually set that date at this point. Christy will advise us at that point in the meeting. 6:40, discussion vote regarding the articles on the town meeting warrant, and we will be passing over, correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, closing the warrant at this point because we don't have that date. And then final agenda item is discussion vote on U.S. Census Bureau Final Boundary Validation Program, or BVP. So with that, I'll turn it over to our building commissioner, Fred Leonardo.
So Shelby, good evening. Deputy Chief Berkey. I'm going to actually speak on Fred's behalf. He was unable to make the meeting.
Okay, thanks.
So Bertucci's has applied for a modification for the outdoor seating. They've currently, I drove by their setup today. It's mostly up. I believe that they took the canopy down and secured their chairs due to the weather that was impending. Overall, the site looks fairly decent. I'll conduct an inspection of it probably sometime with the board's approval in the next couple of days, tomorrow. What the plan doesn't show is that the barriers that they use are actually fairly decent sized concrete blocks. It is well secured. There is posted signs, and there is a canopy tent that covers most of it. I haven't done a formal inspection on it, but it looks like the 4 tables that they've depicted there. I don't see any red flags based on all the other ones that we've done so far.
Okay. I'll open it up to questions from the board. And if there are none, I'll take a motion.
Sure, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Jason, that they currently have outdoor dining on the side of that building. Is that in use and this is additional, or is that what's happening here?
Yes, this looks like it gives them 4 additional tables with 4 seats each.
Okay,
increases their capacity a little bit.
Perfect.
Yeah, if it meets Jason's criteria, it meets mine. I move that we approve the plan as Jason has presented it and inspected it for Bertucci's.
I'll second that.
You're approving the alteration of premises.
Yep.
Yes, I move we approve the alteration of premises as presented by Jason Fursch at this meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for a roll call vote. Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
Selectman Johnson?
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. That's 5-0, 5 being present. It passes. Great. Thank you very much, Deputy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I will now move to our second agenda item, which is a town meeting debrief with John Arnold and as our town moderator. Mr. Arnold.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Some ways, town meeting seems like forever ago, but it was 6 weeks or so. It's a pretty wild time, as we know. And I realized when I was going to be listening in to find out more about the plans for the special town meeting, I realized now's as good a time as any to do my annual discussing about feedback about town meeting, especially since it was a very odd occasion, though I think overall it went well. And mostly as we think about having either the special town meeting you're going to be discussing tonight, or as we start moving closer and closer to the October town meeting, I didn't want to forget and I wanted to get some more opinions about what worked well, what didn't work well, what we can do differently, other than hope for cooler weather. And so I just wanted, not that we have to spend a lot of time, I just wanted to get what you people had heard, as well as what you people felt being in the room for the 4 hours.
Okay. John, do you want to share your observations first?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't write up any formal observations. My the thing that I wrote up that I sent I did a little report, as the other moderators are doing, on our email list. And the overall observation I made is that I think the meeting was very successful because COVID-19 didn't become the show, and it was not even that much of a distracting sideshow. And from talking to a few people in my family who watched at home, if it weren't for seeing that people were wiping down microphones rather than taking the time for the roving microphones, the discussion, the action, and the vote all seemed relatively normal, other than that it was very hot. And I'd like to thank everyone involved in the setup. I think having it spread over 2 rooms worked well. I felt that people were very cognizant of keeping masks on and wiping things down. And so given how poorly it could have gone, I think it went about as well as I think it could have. And the few critiques that I have really has more to do with making sure that the sound, that maybe Wendy and I try to get better sound, because I know a couple times I misheard what Lisa was telling me from the auditorium. And then just Wendy and I, when we're not right next to each other, having better communication just to know what's going on. So I was pleased that I don't have the email in front of me. I believe about 140 people showed up maximum, which was I thought a good size. I know we all want more people, but we planned for not having a huge crowd. And given between the heat and the fact that it was the end of June, and the fact that some people, I'm sure, were choosing to opt out for their own or their family's health reasons, I thought it was as a representative sampling of town, and I thought overall it went pretty well.
Great. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to the board at this point for comments and maybe even suggestions if you have some. So who would like to go first? Don't all jump at once.
Yeah, I'll go first. It was just
All right,
finding
thanks.
the moving the mouse to the unmute.
Thanks.
I agree that it went really well. I think there may be having, the auditorium and then the band room remotely, that there might be a different technology solution to getting audio and video between the rooms. That there's some other options I think we might be able to explore there. As John mentioned, the audio issue, but also potentially giving people in the different rooms, the ability to at least see the other rooms and see who's there. Sort of almost like a video conference meeting within the meeting. I know Karen at Westborough TV is probably, oh my goodness, that's going to make it complex. It doesn't have to, I don't think. I really appreciate people hanging out for the full 4 hours. It was hot in the gym, and hopefully we won't have a heat wave in October or November whenever our fall town meeting gets scheduled. As far as that goes, and I think the inflow of people and getting people checked in and registered went much better than I expected. I don't think there was ever really a big backup line. People weren't crowding in the hallways. They were able to maintain the separation. So I think all of those are things that went very well.
Thank you, Alan. Syed.
I just want to echo what Selectman Edinburgh said. You know, the fact that we had this town meeting without a bump in our case rate is really impressive. John, I don't have any problems. I'm concerned and I'm speaking now, I guess, as a selectman. There have been reports of some uptick in cases. I guess we'll just have to monitor those numbers as we head into our next town meeting and where we stand.
Right. Yeah. Let me just jump in now. I can come back and talk later. But one of the suggestions I had is that if we have a very small warrant for whenever this special town meeting is going to be, and if we think that between the West Nile virus and the Triple E mosquitoes won't cause even more problems, I was thinking we may want to consider having an outside town meeting if it's a very short number of articles, because it could be. And I don't think there'd be as much need for projecting. And that was the main problem with not having it outside, in addition to the heat, was going to be getting bright enough projection. But if we have a very short number of articles and could easily hand out maps and little handouts to augment the Finance Committee booklet, it could be that if we're going to do one in August or early September, we may want to try doing it outside. That's one of the things I want.
I would suggest that we discuss that with the Board of Health.
Right.
We are heading into, you're right, we are heading into Triple E season.
Yeah.
We just need to be, you remember last year we had a critical level of Triple E in our town.
Yeah. And I noticed the first human case got detected, I think, somewhere near Plymouth just today.
Yeah.
So I know that's one of the reasons why I've asked Steve to put me on the agenda for the next Board of Health meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Syed. Ian.
I just want to echo some of the comments. I thought it went as well, if not better, than expected. I think there's a lot of work put in, a lot of planning, but I did not hear, complaints from folks that it was different. I thought the process of town meeting worked well, albeit we need to remember that we did shorten the number of articles by doing the Passovers. I thought that was smart at the time. It does put more on fall town meetings, so something to be cognizant of there. I do like Alan's idea. I guess the one thing, if technology permitted, I think getting better visual in my mind, because I did feel distant from the folks that were either in the auditorium or the band room. I'm not sure if others did, but I would love, kind of the sense of community that comes with town meeting to be able to have some visual look at the other two rooms one way or the other. But outside of that, I thought the volunteers helping, I thought that the people were respectful. I think the volunteers helping get people to kind of assigned seats, almost like a hostess or host getting them to their table, I thought worked great. So, it was hot, but we got through it, and I think it was all good. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Lee, I know you weren't able to be there. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it or you heard feedback from anyone, if you'd like to chime in.
I didn't get any negative feedback, that's for sure. And I got positive feedback. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend. I think everybody did an admirable job, and I agree with the other suggestions that people already made. Makes sense having that cohesiveness visually, even if you can't be together, with a different setup for visual would be good. Yeah. And trying an outside meeting, I'm all for it.
Yeah. And I do want to acknowledge, I think we all knew that not having that two-way video was going to be a problem. It was really just a limitation of time, money, and having it have to be in 3 rooms. I mean, for those of us who can remember back to the large town meeting we had for the high school lights, I think we all know that was made better because each room could see each other. And I know it made my job easier because I could get a sense of how many people had their hands raised to speak. So I just want to acknowledge, I think we all know that's the better way to do it. It's really just going to come down to time and how many rooms we need and all that. But we'll continue to strive for that, and I'll continue to work with Westborough TV and the schools to try to see what we can do.
Great, thank you. So I want to echo all the comments that were made already, great suggestions, as well as just the positive feedback for all the planning, the pressure points that I anticipated, so to speak. We're not there, so that's great. I do have a couple other additional suggestions. Where we were sitting as sort of a group, albeit spaced apart, it was very difficult to hear the audio because the speakers were in front of us. So there were times where I was really straining to really kind of capture what anyone was saying, even when it was you, Mr. Moderator. So I also would suggest that, again, with time and planning, that we might have some additional screens in the room. I don't know, again, for us, maybe it was just positioning of our desks. It was, the screen was behind us, whereas typically it's sort of off to the left. So we might contemplate that. I don't know how the audio was for folks in the back of the room or those that were off to the side, if they could see as well. So those are just some thoughts in terms of the room that they were located in. I presume in the auditorium, there was, and I think there were two people in the band room, they could see because of where they were placed and where the audio and visual were set up traditionally. I think we should consider, obviously, working with the Board of Health, whether or not it's a requirement to wear a mask while you're seated at your own individual desk, if that's kind of the way we proceed. I certainly would operate it with an abundance of caution, but I felt like that wasn't necessarily necessary if we're already 6 feet apart. I realized the time in which we had it, we were all, there was, COVID was spiking and in Massachusetts, but I felt like that was more, and I honestly made it difficult sometimes to hear people when they were speaking by having the mask on. Another suggestion would be for the boards. Typically, John, when we start town meeting, and I honestly don't recall if you did this or not, but, you say, the Board of Selectmen's here, Advisory Finance Committee. I think those folks were sort of clustered together, school committee, et cetera. I'm wondering if, again, this is thinking longer term, and if we were to have this size of a meeting again, if we actually need sort of signs or something to kind of point out where those groups are sitting, so that, particularly because you're not on an angle seating like you typically are in the auditorium, so you're on a flat surface, being the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if folks knew where those groups would typically be, particularly if they were maybe wondering, like, why are these people facing us and we're all facing this way?
Yeah.
My final comment, and again, I appreciate that we had to socially distance. But I did find it, as a board, it was difficult not to be sitting together, to kind of have, consult with Christy, or, hear what Leah was saying, or even from our attorney, who was, I think, back and to my right, and kind of, so there were some challenges, but again, to Ian's point, because we were able to pass over so many articles, those that might have raised longer points of discussion, sort of didn't bear fruit. So, but I think if we were to do this again, we really need to kind of think about how can we do that and obviously maintain safety.
Mrs. Chair,
Yes.
you made me think about this, even though I wasn't there. I talked to John afterwards about why he placed the boards in the larger room, because he said there were more people there instead of keeping them in the auditorium where you had the stage and our normal setup. I think we might want to consider going back to that, because that's what people expect. It makes it easier for all the boards to communicate and to see things, and then project that really well in the auditorium. I mean, for the work that we have to do as boards, that might be the best arrangement, even though it's not in the room with the largest number of people. They benefit from having that work well as we do. So I think we might want to reconsider that, although I do understand why John made the decision he made at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. It was a tricky call, as you can. I also I personally wanted to be in the gym, because I realized if it was going to be hot and people suffering, I didn't think it was fair for me to essentially be presiding in the air conditioned comfort of the city auditorium. But yes, we can think about that. I think the problem to overcome, and we don't have to talk about it now, the problem to overcome is looking at the map that Nathan and the Board of Health drew. Is by the time we spread out 9 finance committee members, 5 selectmen, plus the staff that you'd need, plus the school committee, there's not room for all that many voters. And so
Sure.
the rationale, not that we can't change it, but the rationale was that the majority of the voters should be where the majority of the boards and committees
Yep.
are. But certainly redoing the numbers and seeing what the Board of Health has learned and how the situation has changed. All of it's worthy of thinking about before we do it again, especially for something that's going to be, maybe equally lengthy or almost equally lengthy for the October special.
I think the great news is we had an exceptionally good experience underneath our belts.
Yeah.
And we're really sort of at this point tweaking. I would hope that based on this feedback, maybe for those that watched at home, they would be encouraged to attend given the precautions that they actually saw being, playing out.
Right. And again, as Syed said, I mean, I know a lot of us were just nervous seeing what was going to happen, but the fact that we had a town election and a town meeting and didn't really see any impact of that on the town's COVID numbers, I think was a testament to all the work that everybody did going into it. So, as well as thanking the townspeople for going along with what's very unusual and pretty strenuous requests in terms of what people had to do and how they had to behave. I thought everybody adapted and put up with it very well. And I can't commend them enough.
Sure. I would be remiss. I did receive some comments from folks, particularly those who were seniors in our community who were really disappointed that we were having town meeting because they did not feel safe in spite of kind of the precautions that were shared with them. And so I'm disappointed we weren't able to bring them to a comfort level to get them there. But I think that we did the right thing, and this conversation, as well as all the preparation that went into it, as well as the lack of spike in numbers, I think speaks to, or hopefully speaks to, encouraging others to be able to turn out and attend at future meetings where public safety is of the utmost concern. Syed?
Just 2 questions. One, at least the data, and again, I'm speaking as a selectman, not as a member of the Board of Health, and John, we can discuss this when the board comes. At least the data I've seen is that when you wear a mask, it cuts down. It's not just a protection for for people facing you. It's also protection for yourself. It limits the virus particles that you may potentially inhale. That's one. But again, we can discuss this with the Board of Health. The second is, John, how much cost do we get if we're going to hold a special town meeting, right? With all the precautions that we had in place for the first one, how much will that cost come out of the town's budget? How will that cost be factored in?
I'm not sure there really were any extra costs. I mean, I know we all did a lot of extra work. But I mean, given that we did not use electronic voting, and that actually saved a bunch of money. And again, the rationale for that wasn't that we didn't want it. It's that on very short notice and having to have it spread over 3 rooms, it was going to get even more expensive. And given that we weren't sure, it was going to happen because at the very last minute, we all could have decided it was too dangerous. But I think, the volunteers were the volunteers. The printing was the printing. I believe we got the golf pencils and the index cards sort of came from the country club and the town supply closet. And the water was donated. So I think there was a lot of effort by a lot of people to make it happen. And I don't actually think it ended up costing all that much differently than if it was just a normal, 200-person town meeting in the auditorium at the high school.
Plus, we did get a grant, so for PPE, Christy, perhaps you can speak to if there was any cost associated, but I would assume that any cost would have been, we would be seeking reimbursement through the CARES grant.
Yeah, any costs related specifically to COVID, we would put under our COVID expenditures, which we are seeking reimbursement through CARES Act and FEMA. So I think John's right. I can't think of anything specific that we paid for that was an additional cost.
Right, because the shields were going to be used for voting anyway, and there were a lot of things that were being used over and over again. Yep.
Yeah, all those were the shields from the election, and they were cleaned and moved and all that. And
Yep.
and all the AV stuff was stuff that either the school or the Westborough TV already had, so which was nice.
Great. Christy, did you want to chime in here at all? I'll put you on the spot, but I want to give you an opportunity if you want
No,
to.
I mean, I would just echo what you had said, Shelby, about it was really hard for me to hear. It was definitely different not being able to sort of confer with the board, but I think we expected that, and I think we did the best we could. But it was very hard to hear what people were saying.
Yeah, that is by far the most difficult thing. I mean, because I need to try to get a sense of what people are saying and all that. So, in fact, the sound even in a regular town meeting is never that good, and just in the boomy auditorium with the way it was set up. So I've already made a note to redouble my efforts and to try to experiment earlier if we can with either extra speakers or changing the EQ to get a little more treble, so it's not quite so mid or bass heavy, and do that. But yes, I think it's obvious that from hearing this and my own feedback is that the sound quality, so people feel that it's not a strain to have to understand a point somebody's making, is really the heart of town meeting. And it's really probably the most important thing, even more than seeing what's going on. Trying to understand what somebody's argument is so you can use it to inform your own vote and your own thoughts is very important.
John, I know Westborough TV is behind the scenes today with Karen Henderson taping. Did you get any feedback from them? I don't know if she wants to chime in terms of, I didn't watch the meeting after the fact. Usually once I go through a meeting, that's enough.
Yeah.
Unless I've got to refer back to it for some historical context. No, not usually. But I'm just curious how the sound was at for those watching.
I'll go back and check. I know that my mother and my wife watched bits and pieces of it, and I think they thought it was okay. I think I watched bits and pieces of it, and it seemed okay. But I'll go back and watch some of the YouTube and just see. My guess is knowing a little bit about sound engineering. My guess is that the TV feed was probably great compared.
Yeah.
So we should all have little earpieces.
Okay, Karen.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay. John, I think
Okay.
I think you sort of have our feedback, and
Yep. All right.
we'll be ready to work together again when
I'll
we
let
need
you
to.
have your discussion. I'll sort of keep the meeting on in the background while I do some work, and then if there's questions when you start talking about what's on the town meeting. Now, I know it's your warrant and whatever, but if you have any questions or if I have any comments, I'll let you know.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, great. So we'll move into our next agenda item, which is a discussion vote to execute the purchase and sale agreement for property located at 31 to 33 Eli Whitney Street. Christy, town manager.
So this is something that the board has been talking about in executive session. We also have Mark Silverberg and Tim Buckaloo on the call. Mark is on the Open Space Committee and Tim is on Walkup Robinson. The proposal is for the town to purchase 3133 Eli Whitney, which is 66.15 acres for $2.3 million. The article or the purchase would be funded similar to 30 Belknap Street, where a portion of it would come from Walkup Robinson funds, a portion of it would come from open space funds, and then a portion of it would come from sale of real estate funds. And so we have asked Walkup Robinson as well as open space to meet to vote on the funding of this article, but we do know it's a priority parcel. And so the board has received a copy of the purchase and sale agreement that has been executed by the seller. One thing to note that in the original copy that you received, in section 21, there is a reference to the naming rights on the property. And so the way that it currently reads, and it's in your email, is that the buyer agrees to name, and that's the town, agrees to name portions of the premises that it elects for conservation and open space purposes with a name designated by the seller, and the seller may install one sign at a location reasonably acceptable to the board and otherwise in compliance with town bylaws, and that the town further agrees that the trails on the conservation area, if any, will be named for members of the seller's family, subject to the Board of Selectmen's prior written approval. And so we do have some language. We have not signed the purchase and sale agreement for 30 Belknap, but we have similar language in that purchase and sale agreement that we've discussed.
And the one that we got in the mail didn't have that trails will be named for members, and Christy and I fixed that.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
So if the board is ready, you could certainly vote to execute it. The motion, which I just sent to you in an email, would authorize the chair to execute the purchase and sale agreement, and also any documents to effectuate the purchase of the property. So obviously this would need to go to town meeting. The town meeting would need to authorize the purchase of the property and also the expenditure of the funds. So I don't know if you would want to hear at this point from Mark Silverberg about the property and sort of the attractiveness of the property.
I think that would be great. Thank you. Mark?
Hi, guys. So I'm sorry, I got cut off, lost my Wi-Fi connection, so I missed most of what Christy said. Figures I sit here for half an hour, and then the minute it comes to my topic, I get cut off. So as far as the Eli Whitney property, I mean, it's probably, I don't want to say the largest, but it's certainly in the top 5 remaining residential parcels in town. It's adjacent to several other open space opportunities and existing, I believe there's a budding state-owned land. There is also on the other side of that is Fay Mountain, which I think you all probably know is on my bullseye list for properties we would like to acquire someday. So, I think this would be an exceptional property for us to acquire. I'm glad that you've pursued this. I've asked the Open Space Committee to meet next week to authorize our portion of funding. I'm hoping to do that in conjunction with the Walker Robinson Committee if we can get everybody together. I don't know what other questions. We'll probably end up cleaning out the open space fund, but hopefully we'll get some of that back if we get the grant approved for Belknap. And I can talk to the Sudbury Valley consultant who helped us with that grant to see if there's any grant opportunities for this purchase as well.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mark.
We've actually already reached out to Sudbury Valley, so we'll work together on that.
Sure.
So, I'm trying to pull up the parcel just to orient.
Thank you.
the public.
Tim, is there anything with respect to Walker Robinson that you'd like to add to what Mark had already said from that perspective?
No, I think Mark's identified this property as he's identified the history of it, I think, pretty well. It's been an important parcel for the town. The town's been interested in it since the 1980s. My understanding of the parcel goes back that far and through various development plans which have been submitted and over the years, and parcel pretty well. It has a lot of features which recommend it for the town, not the least of which is preventing the building of X number more houses, which I don't think we need in town. But more than that, it fits the criteria for the Walk-Up Robinson Fund. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't speak on behalf of the whole committee, of course, but I would recommend that we that we have a robust discussion of the property, its values, and that we would endorse expending Walker Robinson money to purchase it. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Christy, I'll turn it back over to you, I think, unless someone else was ready to speak.
So, Shelby, I don't know if you want to see where this is and what it connects to. I can try and present the GIS map or.
Yeah, Christy, I think has, or someone, I'm not sure who's controlling the screen. It's not me. There you go. Thank you. Christy, if you would walk us through, or Mark, whoever's more comfortable, just sort of, so particularly so the viewers have a sense of where is this in relation to maybe some landmarks and streets.
So here is the Fail School property. So this is almost across the street.
So
Mark,
that's
I don't know.
number 50 for
Yep.
folks watching this. Number 50 on the map is the Fail School.
So, Christy, if you zoom out, okay, so just to the south, where you see that those parcels that say off, I believe those are state-owned parcels. I think if you click on them, it'll identify them for you. That one that off, I think, is I forget the owner's last name, but that's another parcel that was for sale for a while.
So these are both town-owned parcels.
Okay.
The top one was, is it McElrath or is that the
Yeah, I think they're 131A maybe, you know. Yeah, no, that one is McElrath. That was for sale for a while. And then if you go even further down to kind of the last one that says off on the very bottom.
On the left there?
Yeah. I believe that's Fay Mountain. I can't see it on your presentation, but
Oh,
you can see that those
You're
would
right.
all be connected if, you know, obviously Fay Mountain's not for sale, so
there you go.
we're not
That's-
looking to acquire that anytime soon, but
So Christy, if you could just highlight the 31 to 33 again, just so folks can see that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, I mean, to what Mark talked about in terms of top 5 in space, look at the comparing areas. I think a few things to notice there is the size of this property is talked about, the 66 or so odd acres. But also if you look at residential communities around that and the number of houses that fit into that space, and knowing everything's different and zoning is different and wetlands, et cetera, but still it is I think as both Mark and Tim said, a very, very attractive piece of property for the town to purchase for open space.
Shelby,
Yes, go ahead, Lee.
would you like a motion and then further discussion?
Sure, I would love a motion if
Okay.
we're ready to make one.
I enthusiastically move to approve the purchase of a 66-acre portion of the property located at 3133 Eli Whitney Street, and to authorize Selectman Shelby Marshall to execute a purchase and sale agreement, acceptances, and any and all other documents necessary or convenient to effectuate said purchase on behalf of the Board of Selectmen.
And I'll second that. That was Syed.
Syed? Okay. I didn't know who got in there first. Thank you.
No,
Moved and
might have been me.
seconded. Further discuss. Oh, was that you, Alan? I'm sorry.
It might have been.
Okay.
We were fighting. I'll defer to
All right.
whoever it was.
Okay. All right. Lee and Alan. There we go. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion by the board?
I just, very briefly, I think it's a great opportunity for the town to preserve a great piece of land and for future conservation and passive recreation.
Absolutely. It's very, very exciting. I'm trying to contain myself.
Well, I mean, we really have worked on it for 20 years. And when you look at that map and see how many homes and families live a quarter of a mile away from that, the wonderful opportunity is going to give that group on that side of town. Plus, eventually we'll have trailhead accessibility and parking for anybody else driving up there. It's just going to be fantastic. It's a property I'm very familiar with from my childhood of riding horseback over it. It's got a lot of diversity and a lot of historical significance, and people are just going to love it.
I was going to ask you to share your personal experience, Lee, so thank you for chiming in there.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
may I add another perspective? I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission in town, and I can tell you that that piece of property has been considered of extreme importance for the protection of the downhill residents of that area. If it was ever developed fully, I think you would see many, many more problems in terms of storm surges, storm problems, runoff problems, and generally a degraded environment in the whole neighborhood. And we have been very concerned because they're a perched watershed up there, which is locked in because of ledge, which the watershed sits on top of. And anytime you start dealing with that problem, anytime you start disturbing it, you run a risk of increasing the storm runoff for the whole neighborhood. I think it's something that should be a reason to take this parcel and protect it and prevent it from becoming prevent it from being engineered into something different. I mean, it could be engineered possibly into house lots that wouldn't do that, but I think it would be a very, very costly, and I don't think you'd have any expectation of coming out with a good result in the end. So I think just from the point of the Conservation Commission, I think it should be purchased as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that additional perspective and insight. From the Board of Selectmen, any other comments?
Shelby, did you want me to show the concept plans, or you want to wait till after the vote?
Yeah, no, I think if we can wait till after the vote, we'll take the vote and then you can show those. That would be great. So yeah, I just want to echo, I'm very excited about this. I know particularly from the perspective shared by Selectman Johnson and Selectman Emery, who have served on this board for many years and have experience in the town with this property, how important it is, and also hearing from others who have spoken on this call in executive session that this is extremely valuable property to the town. And I think the fact that we're making this investment, to quote Selectman Emery, it's like 100-year investment in the future of the town. And I think we should all be very proud and excited to bring this forward on a future town meeting warrant. So, all right. Well, with that and no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Johnson.
And Johnson, yes.
Selectman Emery.
Emery, yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. That's 5-0-0, 5 being present. I want to thank Christy and Ian in particular for all of their work on this, as well as our town council. So thank you very much to get us to this very, very exciting place. All right. Christy, hand the screen back over to you.
Yep. So one of the things that we committed to in talking about the purchase of this property was to move quickly. And so we have on the agenda the setting of a special town meeting date. However, in talking to town council, who's been communicating with the seller, we won't have, we're waiting for the survey plan to be prepared. And so once we know when that will be prepared is when we would set the town meeting date. Being advised that we don't typically go forward with a conceptual plan because we wouldn't want to have to go back to town meeting. And so once we know when the survey plan will be ready, we will set the town meeting date, and that needs to be posted for 2 weeks. So I will circulate the draft town meeting warrant, which has the one article on it. I have talked to the finance committee who's working on setting up a meeting. And then, like we said earlier, the open space and walk up are also working on a meeting. But one of the things that we have talked about is with all this great open space comes the need for parking for people to be able to access it. Similar to the Belknap Street property, where we presented a plan that's reserved some portion of the property under the care and control of the Board of Selectmen, because as the board is aware, when we transfer it to the Conservation Commission, it becomes protected under Chapter 97, and we lose any flexibility to build that parking that we need. And so I have a couple different concept plans for the board to consider. And once we decide what we want to move forward with, we would incorporate this into the surveyed plan that will be presented at town meeting, and we would develop an A&R similar to what we did with the Belknap Street property. So I'll put those up now.
So just to be clear, while Christy's pulling that up, so we won't be setting a date for the town meeting at this time, because we don't want to have to set it and reset it, for obvious reasons. So and for those following along, we're moving along to really item number 5 in the agenda.
So we've reserved just a approximately 4-acre portion that fronts on Eli Whitney.
Christy, can you make that slightly bigger, please? Could be my old eyes. Thank you.
And Christy, who worked on presenting this for us?
Jim Robbins, Lisa Elaine, Chris Pan, our DPW director, and then also Pam Kowaleski in the IT department had did a lot of work on this.
Thank you.
Yep. So this reserves 4 acres along Eli Whitney. It leaves a portion sort of open along this property line. So that was one of the concepts. This is a second concept, which is also 4 acres, but it takes up all of the frontage on Eli Whitney. And then the third concept is slightly more acreage, but just goes along the property line. It's 4.272 acres. And so I just wanted to hear the board's thoughts on which of these conceptual maps you wanted us to move forward with in terms of the A&R, understanding that the majority of the land would still be going under the care and control of the Conservation Commission, and this is the amount that we would reserve under the care and control of the Board of Selectmen.
So I'll open up to the board for comments and thoughts on the 3 models put before us.
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Lee.
Okay. Christy, could you go back to the first option? I have a specific thing about that. In general, we had talked about taking the equivalent of 2 house lots, which would have been 3 acres. So I would like a justification for taking more than that. And perhaps it is just so that we have the flexibility to engineer it the way we need to. And I can understand that, but I want to take as little out of the conservation property as possible. But when you look at this one, where Christy showed the triangle, that is just a little bit of maybe, 40 or 60 feet still remaining on Eli Whitney, and bordering on the right as we look at it, Bream Road or something. My recollection from riding horseback on there is that there's an old cart path that starts right about where that triangle is, or maybe a little bit further in. And it's a beautiful old cart path. And if you know anything about how the environment works, once you have a well-established cart path, big trees don't grow on it later on because it's being compacted over time. And I think there was a stone wall that ran along it in one place, and then it goes over a brook, and there's a little bridge. So I just want to make sure somebody would have to go back and look at it again, because my memory might not be perfect, but I wouldn't want to use the other 2 scenarios that might infringe on what was, I would say, environmentally historic cart path. So maybe when our new DPW conservation officer walks it, he'll be able to find that and identify it. But I would want to keep that in mind when we look at the three different scenarios and protect it, because it's really quite lovely to walk along. Cart paths are about maybe 15 feet wide, and they're just lovely, quiet, easy places to walk on. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Great point.
To answer your question, well, first, I think it's important that, any parking lot that we were going to build would certainly come back. And I don't think, certainly the board's intent is not to use all of the land for parking that we've put within that 4 acres. A multifamily house lot is 2 acres. So that was when talking to the town planner, who's also on the call, the equivalent of 2 multifamily would be the 4 acres. So that's why we went with the 4 acres. But we can certainly reduce it down if that's the board's intention.
Lee, I'll also chime in that my concern at this point, being that these are conceptual, where we're still waiting obviously on the official survey, but is, Mr. Buckaloo made this point, is with ledge, on the property, I don't know, we really don't know where putting a parking space or a parking lot is going to work best for the property. So fully appreciate that we don't want to disturb the topography any more than we reasonably have to allow cars to safely move off of Eli Whitney. But I'm more inclined to sort of, if you will, take more, not knowing what we're going to need for accessing the property in a safe way. But certainly don't want to take more than we need to. And again, the idea here is to maximize all the conservation land.
And Shelby,
Yes.
I may.
Yeah.
My preference here would be the last one that Christy showed, which was it was more.
Yep.
But I think you hit on it. What I think we want to do is allow ourselves the flexibility. I think Lee had asked that question. Allow us the flexibility to fit the right kind of parking trailhead into this property, and limiting it a square. And if we found out the best access was the piece, like on that first diagram where that 50 feet access was, and that was conservation, then we're stuck and we may be doing something suboptimal, more pricey. I think, as I look at it in regards, there could be questions on neighbors. I think that I would look for us as a board to assure folks that, we're not going to be putting something right next to somebody's house. There'd be buffers that we would, make sure work there. And I guess the final piece, 2 final pieces here. One is, as we're designing this, I think as a board, it would be smart for us to work with conservation and open space, whatever. They're the experts more than we are here on this. So all this is really doing is saying, okay, we now have this piece of property that we have the flexibility to use in the best way. And once things are done and we figure things out, and if we figure out that, we have parking and trailhead and we think that that's what we'll need, and that encompasses 2.5 acres, there's no reason why we can't then designate additional piece of the part that went to the town and ask for that to go into conservation restriction as well. So for mine right now, it's give ourselves the flexibility so we can do what's right for the property in consultation with the experts on it. And then, the majority of this is still protected under conservation, which is exactly what we want. We want to assure folks that this is not going to be, municipal use and building on that at all. This is an open space parcel that we're looking for, but this again gives us the flexibility that we don't have our hands and don't allow for proper and safe public access into this tremendous piece of property. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
So,
Alan?
Madam Chair, yeah. Initially I came in, I was thinking that the diagram with that 50-foot buffer to the neighbors to the east, but in hearing Ian's points, I'm now shifting to agree with him that the 4.72 acres, while it's a little more space, I think we can design something that still provides a buffer to the neighbors, and depending on the location of the cart path, protects the cart path, but gives us the flexibility. I know in other projects we have that have happened with small parking areas, whether it was the parking that was built by Lake Chauncey near the soccer fields, or even when we were looking at other parcels in town, one of the issues is, drainage, safe drainage of a parking surface back into the groundwater, and whether it's a trench or a swale or something that you can't do that. If the parking had to be to the edge of our municipal area, we can't make changes in the conservation area. And so giving us room to figure out, not just the parking surface, but where's it going to drain, and how are we going to, potentially let that, draining off gravel or asphalt not impact the environment. So I'm supportive of the plan that's on the screen now with the 4.72 acres. And then we'd obviously work with the neighbors. We'd work with conservation, the engineering folks, and the open space people to come up with a plan that's safe and best utilizes that property for the trailhead.
Thank you. Syed.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't want to kind of echo what Ian said. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Just kind of go along with what Ian said. I'm just a little reluctant on the Board of Selectmen to choose. I mean, I'm just wondering why, since we haven't set a date for town meeting, I would prefer to A, hear from the neighbors, and B, hear from the Conservation Commission about these plans. I think at least the feedback from the abutters and from the Conservation Commission should guide our choosing a plan. I'm just a little reluctant to choose a plan without that input, without that feedback.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, just Syed, are there any other points you want to make before?
No, I just want to make sure that, before us, I mean, we're buying this property for the town, and those abutters are residents of the town. We should make sure that their rights are respected and their voices heard. And of course, as Ian said, that the Conservation Commission has its own expertise, and we should be listening to that.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, I think right now what we're saying is how much of this property, of the 66 whatever acres, should we hold in abeyance so that we can be flexible about using it. We aren't developing a plan. So I think it's premature to bring in part of the town of Westborough, where everybody's going to use it, even though they're the neighbors. Premature in this process. It's not really part of this process. I think the Board of Selectmen is taking the leadership, culminating 20 years worth of work to get to the point where we can buy the property. And now we're saying we have to have some flexibility in order in the future to build a plan that would affect perhaps the neighbors next to it. And that would be the point to bring feedback from them in on it. But right now, I think that just would obfuscate things, which would slow things down. Be very hard to present things in a way that was fair and well measured and get that feedback. I just think it's not what we're looking for right now. I think we need to go ahead with our plan and close this deal as fast as we can and protect some property for the town to be flexible on access to the same.
Okay, thank you.
Shelby?
Yes.
This is Ian. Sorry, this is Ian. I lost power at my house, so my computer connection went down and internet's down, but so I dialed in. So
okay, great, thank you. And I know Town Hall just lost power too. I think I might have heard Christy.
Yeah, I just dialed in as well. We don't have internet.
Okay, all right. And Sheila, I saw you as well. Thank you. Okay, so I don't know, Christy, I don't know when you and Ian fell off. Did you hear Syed's question and point and then Lee's comments to that?
I did not. I apologize.
That's okay. Syed, do you want to just share your comments, and then Lee, I'll ask you to repeat.
Yes, my concern is that, buying this property where there's a lot of residents nearby, I would prefer to hear their input. I think it's on the onus is on us to make sure we hear those voices or get those input, and also in the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Syed. Sorry, regarding what? Regarding moving forward?
Well, yeah. So selecting kind of version 1, 2, 3 of the plan, and then Lee, your comment, please.
Yes, I was saying, in all due respect to Selectman Hashmi, that right now the process we're going through is approving something we've worked on for 20 years to buy this parcel. We need to continue with speed to move it ahead. And then we're saying, we're taking the leadership saying, yes, we should buy the parcel, presenting that to the town. We're also saying that we're also saying that there should be some flexibility of the town to create access and parking, which is just in a way a no-brainer. Of course, you have to be able to access it. But I think right now to bring in a portion of the residents, those living on Bream Street or something, would be obfuscating, would slow things down, and would be difficult to present to them. And why them instead of the whole town that's going to use this property, and difficult to get the feedback. And it's not the time for that. We aren't voting on a plan for parking and access that would affect anybody. We're voting on how much should we set aside to save so we have the flexibility to create a plan. When we actually create a plan, I think that's the time for feedback from whatever residential group we feel is important, but not right now.
So do you?
Lee, this is.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Ian. I completely agree with Lee. I think there is the time that will bring residents in, but we're not, because as Lee said, we're not designing anything now. It's just, how we figure out the property. It's something we heard loud and clear on the Belknap Street property was about parking and access, and that's what we're doing here. It's not approving any plan of what's being built there. It's just saying what is going to conservation, and what is going to be under the, basically Board of Selectmen's control. And it's just really that small portion at the top on that has the access to Eli Whitney Street.
I also just would add that in talking to the town planner, we would need to go through site plan to build a parking lot. And so that in itself is a public process, in addition to whatever public meetings the board chose to hold.
Thank you, Christy.
I'm just wondering, we're making this decision without the input of, why do we have to do this today? I mean, I would like to hear at least hear from the Conservation Commission about these plans. Why do we have to commit to something today? Why can't we? I mean, we're not holding the town meeting at least for another, week or two, at least. Why can't we get the input of the Conservation Commission and help them guide our decision-making process?
Maybe I missed it. What input are you looking for from the Conservation Commission?
Of these three plans, which are they? I would just like to hear what their, or maybe they have a different plan. I'd like to at least get their input. Am I missing something here? I mean, these are the, here's somebody that these.
My question. Go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
We might be about to say. I guess my question is, what would you be expecting them to say? We're deciding how much of the land we want to hold for now under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, so that in the future we could come up with an appropriate plan for trailhead access and parking. When we go to do that plan, they would provide consultation on which parts of the property we've held off, whether it's 4 acres or 4.72 acres, the best layout, the best for the environment, the best for trailhead access, etc. They'd be able to provide that guidance, and that would be not just conservation, but open space and the town engineering department and DPW. It would be the neighbors, at the very least anyone in town, because it's a public hearing process. So, I think this is really a decision of the board to say, does it make sense for us to hold 4 acres or just under 4 3/4 acres to give us the flexibility we need, so that when in the future we decide to create that trailhead access, we have the flexibility and the ability to do it.
So my feeling is that the third version is the best option at this time based on what we know, for all the reasons that have been stated. And it gives us maximum flexibility, knowing what we know and have learned over the past several, 2 years at least, in my tenure about the topography of this land. And to Lee's point, we're not creating a parking plan at this point. This is really just creating a plot within a larger conservation area that could be used for trailhead access. Having said that, Christy, I don't recall, but with the Belknap property, because there is a municipal property and then conservation around it, was conservation consulted to draw up those lines, or I don't recall, because that took a slightly different process than this one has.
Yeah, so with Belknap, the DPW identified
There was an
an
easement.
effort. They identified an effort about 10 years ago where they tried to get easements on that property. And so we drew the lines to accommodate that type of an easement. And then when we heard the concerns about parking, we flared out that middle parcel to allow for some parking at the road.
Okay. And so at that time, was that done, if you will, with conservation consultation, or is really driven by the easement and then we need parking?
It was done with, it was done with DPW and the planning board. So we're having a phase 1 done on the Debrief property. That's part of our due diligence. And so the professional that's going to do that is going to walk the property this week with our conservation director. And so what I did with Belknap, and what I would do again, is provide them with the conceptual plan. And I think this is the first time our conservation director is going to walk the property. And I think, if the board were to settle on a plan and then hear after they walk the property on Friday that there's concerns, I'm sure the board would be willing to hear those concerns.
So Christy, I think
that's perfect.
Yeah, I think, I fully appreciate what you're saying. Like, let's not make a commitment to one of the layouts until we're certain of it. I think, Christy, if we don't make a decision tonight, although I think you have heard from the board in terms of where everyone's sort of leaning, we're not delaying the process, correct?
Well, our intention was to provide the seller's surveyor with our conceptual plan so that it was incorporated into the survey.
Right. Which
So
will save us some money in the end, right? Rather than having to do a redundant work.
It would save us time, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a huge difference between providing it to them tomorrow and then hearing concerns and perhaps adjusting it. The board, certainly you could. I've heard from you that if Jordan, as our conservation director, has significant concerns, that's something that you would want to know, and we should adjust the plan accordingly. But I think it would be helpful to move forward, keep the process moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that first of all, I guess the first question is, do we need a vote on being that this is sort of a preliminary design?
I think
Or plot
I think
plan?
it would be good for you to vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's allocation of property.
Thank you, Lee.
So,
Do I have a motion?
yep, I would move that we move forward with the plan, identifying holding 4.72 acres for municipal use, as presented in the meeting here this evening.
Seconded,
I'll,
Emery.
I'll second that.
Okay. Alan and Lee, thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion from the board?
Yes, I at first didn't want to go over even 3 acres, but I acquiesced to the rationale for taking for allocating 4.75 because it gives us the flexibility, and I trust that our conservation, our DPW, everybody will work together with the neighbors and we'll come up with a plan that works within that piece.
And I support it. I think it's certainly this board's intent to maximize, the undeveloped nature of the land And to me, whether the 4.72 is officially designated as M1 versus Chapter 97, ultimately how we use that land, in my opinion, won't be any different other than having trailhead use there and parking. So I think that we'll stick to the nature of why we're purchasing this, and I would hope that that's the intent of future boards.
Can the board, can you amend your motion to give flexibility to myself and those departments you mentioned, conservation, DPW, so that we can adjust it if something is identified on Friday?
Sure, I would amend the
I'd rather
motion.
come back. You can amend it, Alan.
Yes, I would amend the motion that we're looking at maintaining the 4.72 acres as provided on the drawing here this evening for municipal purpose, to be, subject to any appropriate modifications as deemed necessary by conservation officer at DPW, engineering department, or planning board.
Great,
So wait,
thank you.
if there's going to be any adjustment made, will the board be informed? Will there be a second vote, or it'll just be up to the DPW and the conservation? I mean, I'm trying to understand the rationale for the vote today when there are people that are going to be going out to the property, I guess, on Friday. Why are we committing to this vote today?
I think to move the process ahead. I would want to know, though, Christy, if they recommended a change and have a revote on it. Because I have no idea what the change would be, and I'd want to know it and vote again.
Right.
Okay, well then we wouldn't need the amended motion.
I rescind the amended motion.
You would just have to post another meeting, which would just
Which we'd love to do.
push the process out further. I mean,
Right.
because I wouldn't be able to provide the conceptual plan to the.
I think
Can we
it's,
have a meeting posted for the second Tuesday? You could just
No.
add this to that. We don't?
You
For
do
the
not
second
know.
Tuesday of August? How come?
We
Because
only have
we-
one meeting on the 18th.
yeah.
We moved it to the
Oh.
18th.
Well, let's post one for the second, and if we need it, we'll have it, and if we don't, we won't.
Would Christy, would Kim be able to be there for that?
I think so.
Okay. Christy deserves some time off.
Yes, she does.
So I think there's been enough discussion here that we have a motion and we have a second to the original motion. But I do think that if there are changes to that, then the board wants to hear about that and then consider or have a vote to approve or not that recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, so call for a vote then on the motion made by Alan. Selectman Johnson?
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
No.
Selectman Emery?
Yes?
Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes, that's 4105 being present. Okay,
And then we'll post a meeting for the second Tuesday, and, potential reconsideration of vote on the, however Chrissy wants to write it,
right.
in case we need to do a revote.
Right.
Okay. That may be the only thing on the agenda. It could take us 15 minutes.
Right.
All right.
Or hopefully we don't need it.
Right, exactly. Although I'd miss you guys if it wasn't another week, a week of missed meetings. Okay, so Christy, I think at this point that closes out this, these particular items related to the property acquisition.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll move to our final item on the, I almost said on the warrant, on the agenda. Christy.
So the board received an email yesterday regarding the final boundary validation program from the U.S. Census Bureau. And so the request from the U.S. Census Bureau was that the board identify whether or not the boundaries identified were correct. So I'll put that up on the screen. So this is what we received from the U.S. Census Bureau. I did send this to, so as the chief executive officer of the town, they're requesting that you certify that that the boundaries are correct, and we had 5 days to respond. So I did forward this to Mark Stockman, who worked with Pam Kowaleski in his office on identifying the boundaries and making sure that the points were correct. I also forwarded it to Jim Robbins, who felt that it was correct. Both of them said that they were aware of issues that had been corrected, and so they feel that the boundaries that were sent to you were correct, and would recommend that the board vote that way.
If you help me, which item on our agenda is this? I don't see it.
So it
Number
was-
7.
So it actually got
Oh.
added yesterday.
I only saw up to 6. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because we just got it yesterday. Yep.
So Christy, I'm not a map expert. Does this have to be like certified in any way? You know, when I think of maps and for our conversation, we think surveying, anything kind of more official. I don't want to take away from the work that I've done of our GIS team and our town planner, but is there anything kind of more formal that we should be doing just to make sure this is correct as presented? I mean, I can't really see it, you know, and
I mean, they.
I'm
They
sure
are
they validated it, right? That's what
Yeah.
you're saying.
So
Yep.
there's really nothing else. I mean, they only gave you 5 days to respond. So I don't think that their expectation was that we would go, you know, sort of beyond what we knew needed by, you know, beyond what we were able to do. You know, the board that would fill, or we would fill out, the form that we would fill out says that the highest elected official has reviewed the recent updates to the Census Bureau's boundary for your government, and you would either state that the legal boundary for the government is correct or not correct. And like I said, in our review of it, we feel that it is correct. So.
Okay.
So I would move that we authorize Selectman Marshall to sign off on the census report, identifying the valid boundaries of the town.
Emery, second.
Christy,
Yeah.
there, there was just a report in the news that the Census Bureau had stopped the census because only 66% of the households had responded. So I'm just wondering, I guess just for my own curiosity, where this is coming from. I mean, I'm fine with the motion, and I'm just curious.
No, Syed, I share your a little bit of your maybe skepticism that's driving your question.
Do you understand what I'm getting at? Like, hey, you guys haven't finished the census, but you want our town to validate, and that's fine. We're happy to do it in 5 days or less, but like, you're not done with the census. But anyways, I didn't know if you had any answers to that.
So I actually went online a little bit and looked, and this is strictly making sure that the digital maps they're using are accurate and have been updated if there have been any boundary changes. It doesn't even correlate, as best I can tell, to census takers using GPS to determine what town they're in. It's just literally a mapping exercise, so that the Census Bureau's records are correct.
Okay.
You would think that they would have the maps done before they started the census, but that's just my 2 cents. Call me crazy.
I don't know. I was just looking at the map, and I just noticed we did not accidentally annex part of Upton, so I think that's okay.
Oh, that's good. Well, no, you're not, I mean, right? You're worried about those things that we cut off, and then when all of a sudden we've signed something. So, okay. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second.
So we, just so you know, I mean, we have to do this every time there's a census. So Mark's specific comments were that they reviewed the legal boundaries. They include 2 legislative boundary changes, which needed to be updated during the 2010 census. And additionally, multiple coordinates were checked for accuracy and all checked out correctly. So they did that work for your meeting.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll go to a vote. Selectman Emery,
Emery, yes.
Selectman Johnson,
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh,
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Hashmi,
Yes.
and Selectman Marshall, yes, 5005 being present. I think that concludes our meeting. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Emery, second.
Okay, roll call vote. Selectman Johnson,
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi,
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh,
Thank you to Westborough TV and Edinburgh, yes.
and Selectman Emery,
Emery, yes.
and Selectman Marshall, yes. And we are officially adjourned. Thank you very much.
Yay.
All
Okay.
right. Have
Thank
a good
you.
night. Bye-bye.